afternoon, everyone.
So, if you don't mind, I will speak English. I want to thank you for the invitation to be here and to also, as Marisa said, to say that I think it's very important that we are doing these discussions. I will just share with you some thoughts about the lights and shadows, to use the expression that was used before, the lights and shadows of the Portuguese model. And to present you what we did in 2001 and what happened after that and what we are discussing now. As you all know, in 2001 there was a huge debate and a decision that was very important because we made a change of paradigm in the way we approach the problem or the issue of drugs and drug use. And when we were doing that discussion, the opponents to this decriminalization of drugs, they were bringing to the discussion some nightmare scenarios of what could happen in Portugal if we approved the decriminalization of drugs. They were saying if we decriminalize drugs, we'll give the wrong signal to society, there will be rampant increases in drug usage among the young people, Lisbon will become a paradise of drug tourism, and so on and so on. None of these nightmare scenarios occurred. And actually, what occurred with the law that we approved in 2001 was quite the opposite. So, what happened in 2001? Just to make a very short note, Bloco de Esquerda, Left Bloc, and the Socialist Party, that was in the government back then with no absolute majority, there was a negotiation to approve a new law about drug consumption. The positions of the different parties were different, and the agreement that was possible to make was the agreement around the decriminalization of all drugs, including cocaine, heroin, and so on, and a new legal framework where the drugs were not, the drug consumption and the drugs were not legalized, but decriminalized, which means that, as Marisa said, drug possession for personal use and drug usage itself became exclusively an administrative violation and was completely removed from the criminal realm. At the same time, drug trafficking continues to be a criminal offense, and also drug production. So this decriminalization of drug possession and consumption was applied to the drugs that people had for personal use. How do we measure the personal use? It's the individual quantity that is sufficient for 10 days usage for one person. This is the concept that is in the law. And what was the big change of paradigm in these times? It was the change of the idea of the drug user as a criminal to the idea of the drug user as a patient, someone that needed to be approached not by the police and the courts, but by the national health system. And the results, what is interesting in this change is that back then, in the end of the 90s, when there was public inquiries made by the TVs or the news or whatever, and the Portuguese people were asked what are the main problems of the country, the drugs was always one of the two main problems identified by people. And then unemployment or crime, whatever. But drugs was always in the top. And if you ask right now, it doesn't appear at all. But it's interesting because even if the right wing and the opponents to this change of paradigm in the politics of drug, they were very inflamed in the discussions back then, now there is a huge consensus in Portugal about what was made. It's interesting because we get in the Parliament, we receive in the Parliament, we host some international delegations that go to the Parliament to discuss the Portuguese model of drugs. And they go to the Parliament and we receive them in the Health Commission, because drugs in Portugal, it's an issue of the Health Commission. And usually the people that come from the other parliaments and the other countries, they come from the law and justice commissions of the different parliaments, which is already different, because the members of parliament in Portugal that are discussing this, they are discussing this, they are with different concerns, and they are the people that are dedicated to the health system and all that. And even the right wing right now in Portugal, they adopted in a way this model of decriminalization. Why? Because the effects were so evident that no one can oppose to it. Although we can be critical, and I will say why we Left Bloc are critical about this model and its paradox and what has to be done. The effects of this in this model that was applied since 2001 was that the drug usage has decreased in absolute terms, is that the prevalence rates of drug use in the age group of 15-19 decreased also in absolute terms since decriminalization of drugs, is that the number of newly reported cases of HIV among drug addicts declined substantially, but very substantially, since 2001. The drug-related pathologies such as sexual transmitted diseases and deaths related to drug usage also have decreased dramatically with this decriminalization. The drug-related mortality also dramatically decreased, and to more than half. In 5 years it went to more than half, and now it's less than half of what was before the law. And if we compare with other European countries, what is interesting is that the majority of EU states, European Union states, have rates that are double and triple the rate of drug consumption if we compare to the post-decriminalization Portugal. And there was a huge change in the public perception of this problem also. So that's why there is a consensus about what was done in 2001. But there are, in our opinion, many contradictions also on the model. And I will just identify 3 contradictions. First is that we have all this, the positive results, but in our law in Portugal, you can possess until the quantity of 10 days of use, but you cannot grow and you cannot buy. So how do you do? It's a paradox, no? Because consumption was decriminalized, but to buy or to grow is still illegal, and it's a crime. And if you have 1 gram more than what it is in the law, even if you just bring it in your pocket to give it to your friend, you can go to trial, to court, accused of trafficking. And if you don't want to buy and you prefer to grow in your own home, it's also a crime. Of course, for me, the most important problem in this is that the fact that you cannot grow and you cannot buy, and mainly buy, it's something that allows the police, mainly in the poor neighborhoods, mainly with black communities, to harass young people that are using drugs, to check if their quantities are this or that, and to repress and to so there is still a connection between drugs and police that is used against certain populations. Of course, the middle class 50-year-old person that has the plant at his house is also a criminal, but it is less probable that the police will go to this person. So this is the first contradiction, the first paradox of our model, and that's why we want to go further and to solve this paradox. The second one is that a part of the Portuguese model was also the harm reduction. Harm reduction, yes? Okay. And there is a part of this harm reduction that is not being into practice. For example, the rooms for injection. Yes, we say this. Shooting rooms. The shooting rooms that are in the law. More than 15 years ago, they are in the law, but there is no one. Not even one in the whole country. Why? Because the law put the responsibility for the approval of these shooting rooms in the municipalities, and the municipalities don't want to take the responsibility of choosing the place where to locate this. And in Porto and in Lisbon, the two main cities of Portugal, there is still a strong problem of, mainly in certain parts of the city, of this drug use that is not solved by this. Third, the medical use, the therapeutic use. It's not legal. It's legal if you have your own quantity as the other people, but it's not legal a doctor to prescribe the medical use of cannabis. And in a time where there is more and more research on the therapeutical use of cannabis, the more and more countries where it is possible to use it in medical and therapeutic context, and many people already talked about this, you know, I will not go again to say the multiple diseases, the multiple contexts where cannabis can be useful in this therapeutical context, but it's not legal in Portugal. And now this is the discussion we are having in the Parliament. And not only in the Parliament. In fact, 1.5 years ago, the president of the Institute of Cancer in Portugal, he said that the products that are in the cannabis, the properties that are in the cannabis, they improve the well-being of the patient, and they potentialize the effect of the analgesics. And he said that with the basis, with his experience, he's a respected doctor, the director of a very respected public institution, he says, in a situation of advanced diseases, there should not be illicits to make life of patients better. And also the medical board, Orange Medics, they proposed to have a discussion about the therapeutic use of cannabis. And we presented a proposal also in the Parliament. It was not approved in the previous legislature, and now we are negotiating so that it can be approved. And the fourth problem of the Portuguese model was that in the times of austerity, with the cuts on the public services, also the services related with the health support around drugs were dramatically cut, and the projects that were in the field, the projects of harm reduction, the projects of drug testing in the parties for music festivals, so on, they suffered a cut. What we want, and I finish with less than 1 minute with this, what we want now. So now we are discussing in Portugal the legalization of the therapeutic use of cannabis, and we want to do this discussion also with the medical community, the doctors, and we want to have the broader field of alliances possible to do this. We want to change, to legalize the use of cannabis, and the model we proposed in a law proposition was a model of social clubs of cannabis, so a model that would avoid the market model and that would insist in a more cooperative model that could really legalize the production of cannabis in Portugal and the consumption. Also to legalize the self-growth. And if you have interest, I can explain you in a more detailed way our project of the social clubs, but it's inspired in a way in the experience of Catalonia. And finally, about the other drugs and also cannabis, we want to change the paradigm. We want to bring another change of paradigm, because we have an important change of the drug user as a criminal to the drug user as a patient of the health system. And we want to change from patient to citizen, which means that the associations of drug users, the rights of the drug users, must be recognized as rights as citizens' rights. And the drug users must not only be the subject of the health system intervention or the so-called commissions for dissuasion of drug addiction, that are the commissions that are responsible to deal with the people that are identified as drug users, but we want also to go further in the recognition of the rights of drug users as citizens. Thank you.